Air travel is often seen as one of the safest modes of transportation, but history reminds us that even the most routine flights can end in tragedy. On a cold evening in West Virginia, a chartered flight carrying a college football team crashed just moments before landing, claiming the lives of nearly everyone on board. Decades later, a similar tragedy would strike another football program, echoing the heartbreak and raising questions about how such disasters can happen twice in eerily similar circumstances. Today, we revisit two devastating aviation tragedies that claimed the lives of young athletes, coaches, and staff, leaving a permanent scar on the world of college football. We'll explore what went wrong, how these accidents were investigated, and the safety measures put in place to prevent similar disasters. Our story begins on November 14, 1970. The Marshall University football team had just played a game in North Carolina and was heading home to Huntington, West Virginia, aboard a chartered Southern Airways DC-9. The team, coaching staff, boosters, and crew were excited to return after a hard-fought match. But as the aircraft approached Tri-State Airport, disaster struck. The weather that evening was far from ideal. Heavy rain, low visibility, and fog created challenging conditions for the flight crew. Despite the adverse weather, the pilots were confident they could land the plane safely. As the DC-9 began its final descent, the crew followed standard procedures, relying on both instruments and visual cues to guide them toward the runway. But something went terribly wrong. The aircraft descended below the minimum safe altitude, and the pilots, disoriented by the poor visibility, were unable to recover in time. At 7:36 p.m., the plane crashed into a hillside just short of the runway, killing all 75 people on board. The crash devastated the Marshall University community. An entire generation of football players, coaches, and supporters was lost in an instant. The tragedy sent shockwaves through the nation, highlighting the fragility of life and the dangers of air travel in adverse conditions. Investigators from the National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, arrived at the crash site to determine what had gone wrong. The findings revealed a tragic combination of factors. The pilots had relied too heavily on visual references in conditions that demanded greater reliance on instruments. Additionally, the airport's lack of advanced approach systems contributed to the crew's inability to maintain proper altitude. In the wake of the crash, sweeping changes were made to aviation safety protocols. Airports across the country improved their instrument landing systems, and new regulations emphasized stricter training for pilots in low-visibility conditions. But the story doesn't end there. Nearly 30 years later, another tragedy struck a college football team. On October 2, 1997, a plane carrying members of the Oklahoma State University basketball program crashed just moments after takeoff. The Beechcraft King Air 200, a smaller aircraft than the DC-9 involved in the Marshall crash, was on its way back to Stillwater, Oklahoma, following a game in Colorado. On board were players, staff, and broadcasters, all eager to return home. Unlike the Marshall crash, which occurred during landing, this tragedy unfolded shortly after takeoff. The weather conditions were poor, with snow and low visibility complicating the departure. Shortly after becoming airborne, the aircraft experienced a loss of control. The pilots struggled to stabilize the plane, but within minutes, it crashed into a field, killing all 10 people on board. The similarities between the two tragedies were haunting. Both involved college sports teams, both occurred under challenging weather conditions, and both left communities in mourning. The Oklahoma State crash raised new questions about the safety of chartered flights and the protocols for flying in adverse weather. Investigations revealed that the Oklahoma State crash was caused by ice accumulation on the aircraft's wings. This reduced the lift generated during takeoff and made it impossible for the pilots to maintain control. The crash highlighted the dangers of flying smaller aircraft in icy conditions and underscored the importance of de-icing procedures. In the aftermath of these tragedies, the aviation industry made further improvements to safety standards. Airports invested in better de-icing equipment, and stricter regulations were introduced for chartered flights. Colleges and universities also became more cautious when arranging air travel for their athletic programs, opting for larger, more reliable aircraft whenever possible. For the families, friends, and fans of the victims, the pain of these tragedies remains fresh even decades later. But amidst the heartbreak, both the Marshall and Oklahoma state communities have found ways to honor the memories of those lost. Memorials stand at the crash sites, and annual tributes remind us of the resilience of these communities and their commitment to never forgetting. The Marshall University tragedy even inspired a Hollywood film, We Are Marshall, which tells the story of how the school rebuilt its football program in the aftermath of the crash. The film serves as a testament to the strength of the human spirit and the ability to find hope even in the darkest moments. So, what can we learn from these twin tragedies? First, they remind us of the importance of continuous vigilance in aviation safety. Even the smallest oversight, whether it's improper de-icing or reliance on inadequate visual cues, can have catastrophic consequences. Second, these stories highlight the resilience of communities in the face of unimaginable loss. The legacies of those who perished live on in the hearts of their families and the institutions they represented. As we reflect on these events, we honor the lives lost and the lessons learned. Let their stories serve as a reminder of the progress we've made in aviation safety and the work that remains to be done. Thank you for joining us as we explored the heartbreaking stories of two football tragedies tied to aviation disasters. If you found this story meaningful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more in-depth analyses of aviation incidents. And let us know in the comments, how can we continue to improve air travel safety for athletes and teams? Until next time, stay safe and stay informed.